All right, in our second video, we're going to start digging into specific aspects of culture, starting with symbols and language, and values and beliefs. So last time we outlined these key aspects of culture that we're going to be digging through. It's worth noting at the outset that all of these really shape one another. We pull them apart symbolically or analytically, but really you can't, for example, take your values and beliefs and take your language and symbols away from that. It's often constructed by our language. And language can be very important to what we believe about the world. For example, we often say men and women in our society because some people believe there are just two genders, men and women, while other cultures have words for third gendered people. So simply not having that word for another gender can shape our beliefs about what is and is not, what exists in the world. But we'll get into that in a minute. All right, so last time I left you with this sign, and you all were like, yes, obviously it means stop. And if you see this sign anywhere in the world, you'll know exactly what it means. This is a symbol. Right? A symbol is something that communicates meaning between two people or a group. So a symbol is anything that carries meaning and transmits that meaning between individuals. These can be verbal, or they can be written, or they can be nonverbal. So for example, here we see the president shaking the hand of the Prime Minister of Japan. Early on in this presidency, this was something that many people noted because he is firmly pulling the other gentleman towards him. He has a very sort of strong, odd handshake. Now, on the one hand, this is just a greeting. But the way in which this handshake is done is often seen by others as a way of kind of dominating the other person in the room by pulling authority, by bodily pulling them around. So just with this simple gesture, he's communicating quite a bit. Now, a system of symbols and words and gestures adds up to a language. And so any society, or any culture, we should say, shares a language, which is simply a shared set of symbols and meanings. Now, this is important because we can miscommunicate across cultures. This is the nature of miscommunication. For example, the word Aufbung in German is often translated to abolish in English. When we think of abolish, we think of perhaps to do away with, to destroy. But the German meaning is actually more layered and complex. It means to do away with, but also to carry kind of a kernel or a core aspect through to whatever comes next. That doesn't really come across in our use of abolish unless we know the exact origin of the word. And indeed, we don't really have a word like that in English. So sometimes we can't communicate across languages. The word football, it's football season here, but it's been football season elsewhere, even during the pandemic. Football for us means guys in tights throwing an oval around and hugging each other a lot, but in most other countries, the term football refers to what we call soccer. So the same word can also carry multiple meanings depending on the culture we're in. And so this is why it's important that people within a culture actually have a shared understanding of that meaning that a symbol carries. And this is the source of much cultural stress. For example, you may have experienced walking into someone's home. We have cultures within the home, and you realize it's appropriate to take off your shoes, for example, even though you might not do that at your house, and you might realize this too late. So different cultures have different values and sometimes attach different meanings to particular words. The word fairy in the US is a derogatory slur for homosexual people, but it might mean something completely different because the fairy is actually a creature in Irish and English folklore. So if you go to Ireland it might carry the same meaning, but it also has a more folkloric meaning. Pardon me. And another example, if you are an anime fan, you may know what's going on here, but here we see a young man erupting from the nose, blushing, and giving a thumbs up. If you are not familiar with Japanese culture, then you might not understand that what's going on here is that this guy is basically horny. And Japanese culture, the erupting of the nose is a symbol of arousal. To us, that may make no sense. And if you were watching a Japanese animation on TV and this happened, you would have no idea what's being communicated. And so learning other cultures, we can often get a greater sense of things that we completely miss otherwise. All right, let's move on to values and beliefs. These are very tricky. People often have a difficulty understanding the difference between these. But simply put, values are the should in society. Beliefs are what we think is or exists. Values make up our standards, our ideas about what's proper and improper, what's good and bad. Can be more, and these can be more or less vague. Sometimes we have codes of conduct. You have a very clear student code of conduct. But sometimes values can be much more ambiguous. For example, in our society, if you look at who are the top female pop stars of color, particularly black pop stars, such as Beyonce and others, you might note that many of them are light-skinned. This is a standard in our society, or a value. Our society places higher value on lighter skin. This is called colorism. Now, this isn't written down in any book. It's not published. I mean, we study it. But this is what we call a latent value, or a more or less hidden value. We'll get to that definition later. But it is a value in our society. Whether we think it's good or not is whether we agree with that is a different question. So these are ideas about how to behave in public, how to stand. And these two differ from society to society. We'll think a little bit later about what key American values are. But every culture has its set of standards of proper and good things. Now, beliefs are ideas about what actually exists in the world, the way the world is, right, and what is not. So some people, for example, believe that there is a secret cabal of people in the government who are doing terrible crimes like peddling children. This is known as the QAnon conspiracy. This is a belief about something that exists in the world. Now, as many people have tied this to the president for various reasons, but this is a belief about something that exists in the world. And beliefs are all over the place. Some people believe that there are gods that control our fate. Some people believe that the earth is flat. They're wrong, but they believe it. Both values and beliefs can be manifest or latent. Manifest means easily understood or recognized by the mind, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So, manifest values are those that are clearly written and understood, that we don't have to dig into and think about too much. Right? We believe equality in our society is a good thing. And that's pretty obvious. It's everywhere. But we also have a lot of latent beliefs, and particularly latent values. Latent means present, as in it's there, but not now visible, obvious, or active. So latent is kind of hidden. It's beneath the surface. It's not immediately easily recognized to us. Right? So if we start to think about it, for example, and we think about who are the top black pop stars, we might start to recognize, as we begin to dig into it, that many of them seem to be lighter skinned. Right? But it's not manifest. It's not easily understood or obvious. Nobody says, this is what we believe, this is what we like, or this is what our values are. Right? We have to dig into it. Right? And we'll come into this manifest and latent type of aspect of society a lot. Right? So keep these definitions in mind. So one thing we'll bring up in our discussion, what are some key American values? Ideas about right and wrong, about proper, good behavior, and what are some manifest of these, and what are some latent ones? This might be something we do for our discussion post this week, thinking about key American values. Many of these you might turn to or find in your pop songs, for example. Whether that be, the top hip-hop song of the week or the top classic pop song by Taylor Swift this week. Many of our ideas and our values are embedded in those songs. Think also, what are some core Christian beliefs? What are some of those statements we have when we go to church about what exists, about the way the world is? Is there such thing as an American belief? We'll be picking this apart a good bit more in our discussion and in our class time together.